Any organized civilization inevitably will find the need to defend itself, and so a military is formed. In New Eridu's case, this principle is no different, giving us the new Eridu Defense Force. Within this body lies several squadrons of special forces, responsible for carrying out the more dangerous tasks needed to be done. And so, with the release of 1.6 right around the corner, I thought it'd be nice to go over what we currently know about one of the factions of focus, the NEDF Silver Squad and Opal Squad. However, before we can cover the individual squads, we first need to understand what the Defense Force is. The NEDF is one of 4 major organizations responsible for anti-hollow measures within the city. The lowest severity incidents would call for public security, who responds to criminal conduct and minor ethereal cases, almost always when a citizen is involved. The next step up would be the Hollow Investigative Association, made up of investigators trained more specifically for hollow work, entrusted with combat, research, retrieval, and rescues. The step after that would be Hand Hollow Special Operations, who will enter the fray when major hollow containment is necessary. Hand will tend to deploy smaller sections to deal with threats, which sets it apart from the very top of the food chain, the Defense Force. The Defense Force displays strength in numbers, only stepping in when threats reach the potential to be catastrophic. As Agent Trigger of Opal Squad puts it,
the Defense Force has 3 main responsibilities: deterring external threats, containing hollows, and expanding into new territory.
She then goes on to mention that it's the NEDF who steps in when Hand can no longer adequately contain a hollow. A notable potential case of this in-game would have been the Melano Hollow, had it not been for the actions of HSO Section 6 with our help as the proxy Phaethon. So, where has the Defense Force deployed itself? Well, their most prominent recurring operation is spearheading containment and defense within Hollow Zero. In Scott Outpost, we can see representatives from the organizations involved. Ophelia comes from Hand HSO Section 3 and manages the notorious Hunt operations. Casper comes from the HIA to aid in logistics and the distribution of supplies. Ray comes from the White Star Institute and coordinates research endeavors within the Hollow. And finally, we have Captain Roland from the new Eridu Defense Force, personally in charge of routine cleanup operations and acting as the commanding officer on the outpost as a whole. During our investigation into the mystery of Arpeggio Fault, we even see that Soldier 11 reports to Captain Roland, making him her superior. Outside of Hollow Zero, we know of some other Defense Force operations, thanks to a familiar face. Deputy Chief Tsukishiro Yanagi of Section 6 was actually formerly a soldier of the NEDF. She served during the war with the Oni people, being the one to, in fact, bring an end to the conflict officially by executing the rebel Oni leader. In reality, Yanagi appealed to the leader by stating that the instigators of the war were no longer alive, leaving no more reason for bloodshed. With her last breath, the Oni leader allowed her blood to flow through Yanagi's veins. The entire war with the Oni people could have been easily avoided. Their only desire was to become citizens of New Eridu, showing that the Defense Force is very much capable of cruelty and injustice, especially if under the influence of self-serving leaders such as the ones behind TOPS. Speaking of TOPS, Yanagi also served as a representative for the Defense Force during the rapid expansion of the Argos Hollow. She aided the soon-to-be Void Hunter Hoshimi Miyabi as an informant during the operation. Her role, just like the Defense Force as a whole, would have been to step in if Hand, or rather Miyabi, was not able to handle the situation. Thankfully, no intervention was necessary and casualties were minimized, thanks to the inhuman prowess of Miyabi, who was granted the rank of Void Hunter in response to her effort. Yanagi would later go on to leave the Defense Force, joining the newly formed HSO Section 6 by Miyabi's request. There is one topic left to cover before we get to the characters. It's something you've likely noticed yourself as a player: rebel defectors. these rebels appear to be quite the problem for the NEDF, as we can see ourselves on our many commissions that they are a common combatant. They were behind the kidnapping of the hacker Rain, paid off to use her to sabotage a court airship. They used the Ballet Twins Hollow as a staging area before they were thwarted by members of Victoria Housekeeping alongside us, the proxy. We also encountered a group of Defense Force rebels who had become mercenaries in the Outer Ring. We were ambushed alongside the Cunning Hares in Section 6. The aftermath of the engagement left us alone with Hoshimi Miyabi in a hollow to map our way out. They were paid to retrieve former Vision Corporation CEO Charles Perlman, of which they were successful. The employer of both these rebel groups was none other than the same organization that has been working in the shadows since the days of Eridu. But that is a topic for another day. Our most direct encounter with a rebel faction happened alongside Soldier 11 during an operation to catch a mole. We learned that the primary motivation for defecting seems to be that the rebels believe the Defense Force is unjust. One of them, a former warrant officer, accuses them directly of committing war crimes. Because of his belief, he forced the soldiers under him to defect as well, and for some reason, despite their high-end military training, they seem to have little self-integrity and are cowards in the face of danger. It is likely that this is what a majority of the rebel forces are made up of, with the most shrewd ones leading. Despite their inferiority to the real Defense Force, these rebels still have the training and equipment of their former organization, making them highly dangerous and effective mercenaries. It is safe to assume the new Eridu Defense Force once went by simply the Eridu Defense Force. Trigger speaks on her old placement in the Liar Squad of Chrysoberyl Division, which she specifies is before the fall of the old capital. Why? In the 1.2 event, Roaming the Ether, Nicole of the Cunning Hares brings us a strange laptop to analyze. We ask her to find out details about its origin, and upon returning, she tells us this. Quote, "This laptop was found inside a Defense Force base, likely one of the Diamond Division. The owner was most likely one of the Diamond Division. When the old capital fell, the Defense Force was completely wiped out except for the Obsidian Division. So, the fall of the old capital was a cataclysmic event. It's unknown just how many divisions there were in the Defense Force, but all of them being wiped out save for one should help put into perspective just how much of an impact the event had. You may have noticed that each division follows a similar naming pattern, that being they are all types of rocks or minerals. A chrysoberyl is a type of greenish-yellow gem. And, of course, we've all played Minecraft and are well familiar with diamonds and obsidian. We know very little about the Chrysoberyl Division and the Diamond Division, especially now that they're both out of commission. So for the rest of our time today, we're going to be talking about the squads and characters of the Defense Force's main body, the Obsidian Division. Silver Squad and Opal Squad both operate under this division, though the former dissolved a long time ago. The then active Silver Squad was home to two of our major players for the 1.6 story, Soldier 0, Anby, and Soldier 11. Let's start with what we know about Soldier 11. Loyal to the last, this is the kind of soldier you want serving your home. Soldier 11 places duty and honor above all else, ensuring mission success by any means. Outside of her life as a soldier, she actually has a soft spot for super spicy foods and, funnily enough, cats. If you've gone through the Trust Rank-Up events with Inky around 6th Street, you'll know that Soldier 11 is actually present for all of them. On the other hand, her knack for spicy foods seems to be related to another great interest of hers: fire. I bet she'd get along well with Bernice. Despite Soldier 11's sharp skills, she places little importance on social norms and appears to actually have a pretty faulty memory. We see this firsthand every time she tries to call us by our codename, Crimson Twilight. My personal favorite name she's given us is Emissary of the Carmen Crescent from the Arpeggio Fault questline. It's particularly egregious. Strangely enough, Trigger mentioned that Soldier 11 did not experience the fall of the old capital. I feel it's a safe assumption to say that Soldier 11 must have been old enough, assuming normal human aging, especially because she looks to be the same age as Bell and Wise, who did experience the fall. This could mean that she was simply not at the capital, but considering the scale, I'd be hard-pressed to believe if the Defense Force did not call every active member into duty. The only other explanation would be that Soldier 11 didn't exist yet. And now, my friends, is when we throw on the tinfoil hats. Theory time. I'm sure you've been dying to hear this name the whole video. Anby. Since day one of Zenless Zone Zero, people have pointed out how uncannily similar these two look. And over time, we've learned a lot more about their link, especially now with the 1.6 presentation. Perhaps it's pointless to theorize so in-depth less than a week before we learn the truth, but I'd still like to throw my hat in the ring beforehand. For the longest time, I've been of the opinion that they are sisters. A lot of the community seemed to think they were clones. With our information now, it turns out they could be both. Let me explain. When Anby talked about Soldier 11 during the 1.6 teaser, she used very particular language.
Miss Anby, why do you and Miss Soldier 11 look so similar?
That's because we're sisters.
What? Wait, you mean you are blood-related sisters, like same parents and all? Then are you too close?
Well, we're not sisters in the typical sense.
Earlier in the presentation, Anby also says this.
We are sisters, in a way. Our very existence is evil, but we don't have to become the mistake they made us to be.
Anby thinks of themselves as sisters, but at every opportunity she clarifies that they're not literal sisters. That last line especially is very revealing because it implies that she and Soldier 11 are some sort of evil experiment. We also know that this version of Anby is known as Soldier Zero. Knowing all of this, there are two major running theories. The first and most likely one is that they are clones. If you're familiar at all with Star Wars: The Clone Wars, you might know that the clone troopers refer to each other as brothers, just like what we see with Anby and Soldier 11. However, what we're not sure of is whether or not Anby is the original template. The name Soldier Zero implies she was the first, like a Patient Zero, but I wouldn't consider Jango Fett to be the Soldier Zero of the clone trooper army. Going back to Anby's quote, she says our existence is evil and that we don't have to be the mistake. I believe it is within reason to assume Anby may not be the original template, instead only being the first clone to be made. This leads me to my other possible theory: androids. Intelligent constructs are a known thing within New Eridu, the most obvious example being Billy of the Cunning Hares. We also see Ching Yi from Public Security, who dons a very humanoid appearance, meaning a human look-alike android is well within reason. Anby being an android could explain some more niche things, like how she was able to make oddly precise calculations during the very first missions of the game. There is one thing that would be ruined if Anby was revealed to be an android: her dynamic with Billy. You see, the joke is that Anby is a human who acts like a robot, and Billy is a robot with expressive human emotions. This joke would be lost, but I'm not shelving it just yet. Hello! So, as I was writing this script, Anby's Soldier Zero character demo released. What did we learn? Well, from how it looks, Anby and Soldier 11 might be clones and androids. You see, the word they use is replicas. We see one on the ground enveloped in electricity, which, while it could be explained as the weapons or something else, it seems much more likely that there is a mechanical element to these replicas. Now that we know this, the real question becomes, who are they replicas of? All the language used in the demo suggests Anby is still just a replica like the others, so she can't be the original. The only real candidates of the characters we know would perhaps be descendants of the original Void Hunters, but unfortunately beyond that we will have to wait and see. Let's reel it back to the relationship between Soldier 11 and Anby. Anby's final mission with the Defense Force saw her entire squad get wiped out, and if not for her sacrifice, Soldier 11 would have been lost as well. Anby, as she put it herself, had died in place of Soldier 11, and would eventually be found by Nicole Demara. Soldier 11 would go on to become a part of Obel Squad. During Soldier 11's character teaser, we see that Anby still holds a place in her mind. Echoes of Anby's orders and advice linger, but don't go assuming things just yet. If you watch closely, you might notice that Soldier 11 deliberately seems to disobey every piece of advice Anby gives, even flicking her away while she talks.
Think it through. Stay put. Try not to provoke them.
I have your goods right here. Come and get them if you can.
During Soldier 11's agent story, Mole in the Hole, we also find out that she has a strong distaste for traitors, and it comes off as a personal vendetta. Anby may have sacrificed herself to save Soldier 11, but from Soldier 11's point of view, it could have come across very differently. If we assume that Anby and the other soldiers were meant to use electric weaponry, then it shows Soldier 11's desire to move away from Silver Squad is even stronger, because she uses fire. Keep an eye out next patch for when these two finally reunite. It's going to be interesting. And now we can finally move on to our next character of Obel Squad, Trigger. You won't notice her until it's too late. Trigger is a deadly and effective sniper, just the kind you want having your back in the field. Despite being a hawk-eyed sharpshooter, Trigger is actually blind. She lost her vision when her eyes were corrupted by an ether beam. However, with the loss of one sense, the others rise in potency. Her hearing and feeling capabilities are well above that of your average person, allowing her to even hear small differences in heart rate. Before the fall of the old capital, Trigger served in the Chrysoberyl division of the Eridu Defense Force, under Lyre Squad. A lyre is a stringed musical instrument, which is quite fitting because Trigger and her captain both had an affinity for music. Trigger plays a harmonica melody taught to her by her old captain, titled Homecoming. When you remember that these are military soldiers, the weight of that name becomes more apparent. Funnily enough, Trigger is actually one of the earlier characters we meet, and I mean that as both the Phaethon proxies and as us, the players. Trigger's upcoming agent story, Out of Sight, will take us back in time to one of Phaethon's early commissions, making the proxy's contact with her likely outdate even that of close clients such as Nicole. And we, the players, met Trigger in the Mole in the Hole agent story, where she helps us save Soldier 11 from a predicament during her infiltration. There are two more members of Obel Squad that have been named by Soldier 11, though we have very little information on them. One of them is named Seed. Soldier 11 has said that he is an intelligent construct, just like Billy. Outside of this, we really don't have any information on him. Here's hoping we see him in a future chapter centered around Obel Squad. The other member is Soldier 11's direct superior, Captain Magus. In the initial release of the game, Magus was referred to as a he, but in a more recent patch, the text was changed to a she. All this tells us is that we are likely pretty far from seeing them appear in-game. As far as personality goes, Magus seems to be your standard commanding officer, to the point and always looking for ways to better their soldiers. And that just about wraps up everything you need to know about the new Eridu Defense Force before 1.6 releases. If you've enjoyed this video, I don't ask that you like and subscribe. If you desire to, then I won't object. Instead, I ask that you share this video. Share the lore and world of this game, and show your friends that there is more to see past the surface level. My name has been Glastic. Thank you for watching. Heed the Hollow's call.